Elena wasn't always the woman sitting on the frozen sidewalk, clutching a tattered coat around her shoulders as the world rushed past. Once, she had a life, one that, while not perfect, was stable. She had a job in hospitality, working tirelessly to make guests feel welcome in the bustling city of Chicago. She had an apartment, small but warm, and most importantly, she had Leo, her 10-year-old son, her pride, her reason for pushing forward every single day. Their life was modest but filled with love. Every night, despite exhaustion, she would return home to his eager smile. They would cook together, talk about their dreams, and whisper about the adventures they would one day have. One day, Mom, we'll go to California. I'll see the ocean, and you can tell me which waves look the strongest. One day, sweetheart. I promise. But one day never came. It started with a knock at the office door. Downsizing. Budget cuts. A polite but firm, "I'm sorry, we have to let you go." Suddenly, everything unraveled. She sent out hundreds of job applications, clinging to hope, but the calls never came. The bills piled up. The rent was due. The landlord was unforgiving. Then came the worst blow. Leo's father, a man she had left long ago, took her to court. With no job and an eviction notice looming, the judge ruled against her. Just like that, she lost custody. She lost her home. She lost her son. Now, 2 years later, she was just another invisible figure on the streets, another forgotten soul in the land of second chances, except second chances never seemed to come. It was another brutal winter afternoon in Chicago. The streets pulsed with life, horns blaring, commuters rushing, neon billboards flickering against the gray sky. People wrapped in thick coats moved swiftly, eager to escape the biting wind. But for Elena, there was no escaping the cold. She sat hunched against the brick wall of a storefront, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her breath curling in the freezing air. Her coat, worn thin over 2 years of hardship, did little to shield her from the relentless chill. Beside her, a piece of old cardboard leaned against her knees, the ink smudged from the damp air. "I don't need pity. I need a chance." Most people passed by without a second glance. Some tightened their grip on their bags, others deliberately looked away, pretending she wasn't there. She had grown used to being invisible. It was easier for them that way, to ignore the human being behind the broken shoes and hollow eyes. And then, something unusual happened. A pair of pristine white sneakers stopped right in front of her. Expensive. Spotless. The kind that belonged to someone who had never missed a meal. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, her heartbeat quickening as she took in the figure standing before her. A tall teenage boy, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of a sleek designer coat, looking at her, not past her, not through her, but directly at her. There was something familiar about him. And then it clicked. Barron Trump. The son of a billionaire. A boy who had grown up in the White House. A kid who had never known hunger, cold, or the gnawing loneliness of being forgotten by the world. Why had he stopped? Why was he looking at her like that? Elena swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. "Can you spare $1?" A moment of silence stretched between them, an island of stillness in the chaos of the city. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single question was about to change everything. For a moment, Barron Trump didn't move. He didn't reach for his wallet, didn't step back, didn't do what Elena had come to expect from people with money, either ignore her completely or toss some spare change to ease their conscience. Instead, he stood there, studying her with an expression that was unreadable yet piercing. "If I give you $1, he finally said, his voice steady but calm, "what will you do with it?" The question caught Elena off guard. People didn't ask. They either gave or didn't. No one had ever cared enough to wonder what their money would actually mean to her. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the frayed edges of her coat. She could have said anything, something to earn his sympathy, something that would make him feel obligated to help. But there was something in his gaze, something patient and unwavering, that made her tell the truth. "A cup of coffee," she muttered. "Something warm. Just trying to get through the night." Barron nodded slightly, as if considering her words. Then, without a word, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp, clean $100 bill. Elena stiffened. Her breath hitched as she stared at the money, her heart pounding. $100. It didn't make sense. $1, maybe $5 on a generous day. But this? No one gave that much to someone like her. Her eyes flickered up to his, filled with uncertainty. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Barron's expression didn't change. He simply shrugged. "Because I can." It was such a simple answer, yet it held weight. Because he could. Because it was within his power to help. No pity, no expectations, just an act of kindness from someone who could afford it. Elena wanted to take it, God, she wanted to, but something held her back. She had been here before. She had received help before. And yet, here she was, still on the street, still struggling. Money always disappeared too fast. A night in a cheap motel, a few hot meals, and then she would be right back where she started. She clenched her fists, shaking her head. "I don't want to take something just to waste it." Barron raised an eyebrow. "Why do you think you'd waste it?" She exhaled sharply, glancing away. "Because I've been here before. People help, and for a little while, things get better. But then life happens, and you end up right back where you started." A flicker of something, understanding, maybe even curiosity, crossed Barron's face. He crouched down slightly, lowering himself to her level. The world around them blurred, the honking taxis, the clicking heels of rushing pedestrians, the distant sirens. In that moment it was just the two of them. "What if this time is different?" he asked. Elena let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's what I told myself last time." Barron studied her for a long moment, then reached into his coat pocket again, not for more money, but for something else. He unfolded a small piece of paper and held it out to her. "If I give you this," he said, "you have to make a choice. It's an address. A shelter. A place that can actually help." Elena hesitated. She had seen places like this before. Some were real. Some weren't. Hope was the most dangerous thing a person like her could have. "And if I don't go?" she asked, testing him. Barron shrugged. "Then you don't. It's your choice." The simplicity of it caught her off guard. No pressure. No guilt. Just a choice, one she hadn't been given in a long time. Elena stared at the note, then at the crisp $100 bill still in his hand. She could take the money and disappear into the night, let this moment fade into just another memory. Or she could step through the door he was quietly leaving open for her. Her fingers curled around the paper. Maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Elena sat there long after Barron Trump had disappeared into the bustling city, her fingers tracing the edges of the crisp $100 bill and the folded piece of paper in her lap. The city continued around her, indifferent and relentless. Horns blared. Footsteps clicked against the pavement. People hurried past, wrapped in their own worlds, oblivious to the moment that had just taken place. She should have felt relieved. Money like this could change everything, at least for a little while. A hot meal, a warm bed, a night in a cheap motel where she wouldn't have to sleep with one eye open. And yet, her hands trembled. It wasn't just the money that unsettled her. It was the way Barron had looked at her, not with pity, not with disgust, but with something deeper. Expectation. As if he saw something in her that she no longer believed existed. And she wasn't the only one who had seen it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone had been watching. A bystander, standing just far enough away to capture the entire encounter on their phone. They had watched as Barron crouched down, as he listened, as he challenged her in a way no one else had. They had caught the moment when he extended the money, and the look in Elena's eyes when she hesitated, as if standing on the edge of something bigger than herself. By nightfall, the video had hit the internet. At first, it was just a short clip, shaky footage posted by a passerby, buried beneath the endless flood of social media content. But there was something about it that struck a chord. People watched as Barron knelt before a homeless woman, as he spoke to her with quiet patience, as he offered not just money, but dignity. The words that cut through the city's noise soon echoed across screens everywhere. If I give you $1, what will you do with it? If I help you today, will you help yourself tomorrow? It wasn't just about the money. People had seen wealthy individuals hand out cash before. What made this moment different was the way he treated her, not as a burden, not as an afterthought, but as someone worth believing in. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, each share carried it further, each comment fueled the conversation. Some called it an act of privilege, others saw it as genuine compassion. But no matter the perspective, one thing was undeniable: people were paying attention. This is what real generosity looks like. He didn't just throw money at her, he gave her a reason to believe in herself. Privilege with purpose. We need more of this in the world. By the next morning, news outlets had picked it up. Headlines ranged from "Barron Trump's unexpected act of kindness" to "Can one conversation change a life?" Interviews, opinion pieces, debates, it seemed everyone had something to say. And behind all the noise, something real was happening. Donations began pouring into the shelter Barron had directed Elena to. Hundreds of people reached out, asking how they could help, how they could do more than just share the story. Volunteers signed up in record numbers, eager to be part of something meaningful. A small fundraiser started in Elena's name, intended to give her more than just a second chance, a real shot at rebuilding. And Elena? She still didn't know any of it was happening. She was too busy making a decision. She had spent years learning not to trust kindness. She had been given money before, only to watch it slip away, swallowed by the endless cycle of survival. But this time, something felt different. That night, instead of disappearing into the city's shadows, she made a choice. She bought food, not just whatever scraps she could afford with spare change, but real food. She found a laundromat that stayed open late and cleaned her clothes as best she could. Then she sat at a bus stop, counting down the hours until morning. And when the sun rose, she was standing outside the building Barron had sent her to. It was smaller than she had imagined, tucked between two towering office complexes, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A simple sign hung above the door. Hope Outreach Resource Center. People shuffled in and out. Some carried small bags, others looked just as hesitant as she felt. Her stomach twisted. She could still turn around. She had survived this long on her own. She didn't need charity. She didn't need anyone. But then she heard Barron's voice in her head: "If I help you today, you have to help yourself tomorrow." Her breath shook as she exhaled. And then, for the first time in 2 years, she stepped forward. Elena had no idea the world had been watching. She had no clue that, while she hesitated outside the doors of the Hope Outreach Resource Center, millions of people online were already invested in her story. She didn't know about the viral video, the debates, the donations pouring in from strangers who had never met her but somehow believed in her. All she knew, standing there in the cold morning air, was that she had a choice. For years, she had lived on survival mode, learning the hard way that hope was dangerous. Hope made you believe things could change. Hope made you think help would last. But help had always been temporary, money ran out, shelters had limits, kindness was conditional. She had been let down so many times before. But Barron Trump's voice echoed in her mind: "If I help you today, will you help yourself tomorrow? She tightened her grip on the folded paper he had given her and stepped inside. The warmth hit her first. The air inside the center was different from the biting cold she had grown used to. A receptionist greeted her, not with suspicion or judgment, but with a simple, "Good morning. How can we help you today?" The words nearly undid her. For the first time in years, someone was offering help without expectation, without strings attached. She cleared her throat, struggling to find her voice. Someone told me to come here. He said you might be able to help." The woman behind the desk smiled gently. "And who sent you?" Elena hesitated before answering, "Baron Trump." A flicker of recognition passed through the woman's eyes. "Ah," she said knowingly, "we've been expecting you." That moment was the first of many that changed Elena's life. Over the next few weeks, she was given a safe place to sleep, clean clothes, and warm meals. But it wasn't just about the basics. What truly mattered was that she was given the time and space to breathe. To think about something beyond just making it through the night. A caseworker named Jenna helped her navigate the overwhelming road ahead. "Elena," Jenna said one day, sitting across from her in a small office filled with paperwork and second chances. "I don't just want to get you off the streets, I want to help you stay off them. Tell me, if you could do anything right now, if your past didn't define you, what would you want?" Elena swallowed. No one had asked her that in years. She thought about the life she used to have, the job she loved, the daughter she had lost. I want to feel like myself again." And so, step by step, they worked toward that. She attended job training workshops, met with counselors, slowly began to rebuild what she had lost. It was terrifying. She had spent so long expecting failure that success felt foreign, like a trick waiting to unravel. But every day, she showed up. Every day, she tried. And then, one evening, something happened that she never could have anticipated. There was a letter waiting for her when she returned to the shelter. Her name was written in neat, careful handwriting, the kind that made her stomach twist with familiarity. Hands trembling, she tore it open. "Mom. I saw the video. I've been looking for you. If you're ready to start over, so am I." She pressed a hand to her mouth as a sob tore through her. It was Leo. Her son had found her. A week later, Elena stood in front of a small cafe, her fingers twisting nervously in the fabric of her coat. Through the glass window, she saw him. Sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup, his hair a little longer, his face a little older than the last time she had seen him. He looked so much like the boy she used to tuck into bed at night, yet different, more grown, more guarded. Her breath caught. What if too much time had passed? What if he didn't recognize her anymore? Then, as if sensing her presence, Leo turned. Their eyes met. And in that single moment, all the years, all the distance, all the heartache melted away. Slowly, Leo pushed back his chair and stood. Elena barely had time to take a shaky step forward before he was in front of her, arms hesitating for only a second before wrapping around her in a fierce embrace. She held on tight, her body trembling as she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Leo shook his head against her shoulder. "I don't care. You're here." The world could have stopped spinning, and it wouldn't have mattered. Later, they sat across from each other, speaking in cautious sentences that soon turned into laughter, into tears, into memories and apologies and promises that carried more weight than words ever could. And as Elena looked at her son, she realized something. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a beginning. Elena never imagined that a single conversation on a freezing sidewalk would ripple out into the world the way it did. She had spent years believing that she was invisible, just another forgotten soul blending into the background of the city. But somehow, Baron Trump had seen her. And because he had stopped, because he had offered more than just money, but belief in her, everything began to change. Reuniting with Leo was more than she had ever dared to hope for. At first, their conversations were cautious, like two people testing the waters of something fragile. But slowly, the walls came down. They talked about everything: what he had been doing in school, how he had been waiting for a way to find her, the video that changed everything. "I never stopped looking, Mom," Leo told her one night as they sat on a park bench, sharing a bag of takeout. "I just didn't know where to find you." Elena swallowed past the lump in her throat. "I didn't know where to find myself, either." But she was finding her way now. She had moved out of the shelter and into a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a tiny one-bedroom with a leaky faucet and peeling paint. But it was hers. It was warm. It had a door that locked, a bed with fresh sheets, and a window where she could watch the city lights flicker at night. And most importantly, it was a place where Leo could visit. The power of a second chance. Elena knew she had been given something rare, a true second chance. Not just a fleeting moment of generosity, not just a one-time gift, but a real shot at rebuilding her life. And she wasn't going to waste it. She found a job at a small cafe, a humble place where people came for their morning coffee, their afternoon breaks, their late-night conversations. At first, she was nervous. It had been years since she had held a job, years since she had felt like she belonged anywhere. But as she took orders, brewed coffee, and greeted customers with a smile, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And then, one evening, the door jingled, and a familiar figure stepped inside. Barron Trump. He was taller than she remembered, standing there in a sleek coat, hands in his pockets, looking around the cafe like he wasn't entirely sure if he should be there. Elena's heart pounded. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Barron smirked, that same unreadable expression in his eyes. "Didn't think I would either." For a moment, they just stood there, both knowing that neither of them had expected this, their lives colliding again, in a way neither could have predicted. "Coffee?" she asked. "Sure." She poured him a cup, the rich aroma filling the space between them. He took a sip, nodding in approval. "Not bad." Elena laughed softly. "I've had practice." She hesitated for a second before saying, "I never got to thank you properly for that day." Barron shrugged, setting his cup down. "You did what you were supposed to do. You helped yourself." She exhaled, shaking her head. "Yeah, but I wouldn't have, if you hadn't stopped. If you hadn't seen me." Barron studied her for a long moment. "Most people just need someone to believe in them." She nodded, understanding now more than ever. Passing it forward. Weeks turned into months, and life continued to rebuild itself around her. Elena worked hard, saved money, and slowly but surely, she started to feel whole again. But there was one more thing she needed to do. One night, after closing the cafe, she walked down the street, the cool night air biting at her skin. She didn't have a destination in mind, just a feeling pulling her forward. And then she saw her. A woman sitting alone on a park bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes downcast, shoulders hunched against the cold. Elena hesitated. She could walk past. She could pretend she didn't see, the way so many people had done to her. Or she could stop. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The woman barely looked up as she approached, her voice hoarse from the cold. "What do you want?" Elena smiled gently, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a single bill. And then, in the softest voice, she asked, "If I give you $1, what will you do with it?" The woman blinked, startled by the question, the same way Elena had been months ago. For a long moment, she didn't answer. And then, slowly, she whispered, "Probably buy a coffee." Elena nodded, a familiar warmth blooming in her chest. "What if I gave you $100 instead?" The woman's eyes widened. Hope flickered in them, just a little. And just like that, the cycle began again. The ripple effect. Elena's life didn't change overnight. It wasn't a single act that saved her, it was a series of choices. One step forward, then another, and another. But it had started with someone who didn't just see her as a woman on the sidewalk. Someone who had given her more than just charity. Someone who had given her the chance to believe in herself again. Now, she had the chance to do the same. Because kindness has a way of rippling outward, reaching places we never expect. So ask yourself, if you had the power to make a difference, would you? Because the truth is, you do. Elena's life had taken turns she never could have predicted. Just months ago, she was sleeping on the cold streets, her body aching from the unforgiving pavement, her heart heavy with the weight of being invisible. And yet, here she was now, standing inside her own apartment, drinking a warm cup of coffee, and making plans for the future with her son, Leo. But something inside her wouldn't let her forget where she had come from. She had spent years being overlooked, dismissed as another statistic, another unfortunate soul lost in the cracks of society. She had felt the sting of people looking right through her, pretending she didn't exist. And because of that, she had promised herself something: she would never look past another person in need. So on her nights off from the cafe, Elena found herself walking through the city, not as a lost soul, but as someone who had been found. She carried small bags filled with food, gloves, and blankets, offering them to those who needed them most. But more than that, she did something that few others had done for her: she acknowledged them. She stopped. She spoke. She listened. One night, as she walked past a gas station, she saw a man sitting on the curb, his head bowed low, his arms wrapped tightly around himself. She recognized the posture. She recognized the pain. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Hey," she said softly. "You hungry?" The man looked up, his face hollow with exhaustion. He hesitated before nodding. Elena handed him a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Here. Eat." He took it, his fingers trembling slightly as he unwrapped the food. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city surrounded them, cars passing, people talking, the distant hum of a world that never seemed to slow down. Then, finally, the man looked at her, something wary in his expression. "Why are you doing this?" Elena smiled gently. "Because I can." The words felt familiar, like an echo of a moment that had changed her life forever. The man studied her for a long time before nodding. "People don't usually stop," he murmured. "They just keep walking." Elena knew that truth all too well. She had been the one left behind. She had been the one everyone ignored. Not anymore. Now, she was someone who stopped. Now, she was someone who reached out her hand. Because she understood something most people didn't: a single act of kindness can change everything. Just like it had for her. Elena's journey had taught her something she never truly understood before: kindness is not just about giving, it's about believing. It's about looking at someone and seeing their potential, not just their struggle. It's about offering not just charity, but dignity. She had once believed she was beyond saving. That life had closed its doors on her, that second chances were for other people, not for someone who had fallen as far as she had. But a single moment changed that. A boy who had everything had stopped for a woman who had nothing. Not just to give her money, but to challenge her to believe in herself again. And because of that moment, everything was different now. Elena no longer walked with her head down. She no longer felt like she was fading into the background of the world. She had a job. A home. A relationship with her son. A future. But most importantly, she had a purpose. She knew she could never repay Barron Trump for what he had done for her. There was no way to return a gift like that. But maybe, just maybe, she could do something even better. She could pass it on. Because kindness has a way of rippling outward, reaching places we never expect. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one moment, one person, one simple choice: to stop, to see, to believe.